Okay, so get this. We're going deep today.
Uh-oh.
Deep into metaphilosophy.
Oh, there.
We're basically holding up a mirror to philosophy itself and being like, what's the deal? What are you about?
Right.
You sent over this amazing piece from the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy.
Yeah.
And it maps out all these different ways people have thought about philosophy like over the past century.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, where do we even begin with all this?
Like, it can feel kind of overwhelming at first. No.
Yeah.
But let's think about it this way. We're basically on this quest, right?
Okay.
We're on a quest to figure out what philosophy is, like, really all about.
Okay.
And, that encyclopedia excerpt you sent over, it's like our treasure map.
I like that.
Yeah.
A philosophical treasure map?
It's going to guide us through all these different schools of thought, each with their own perspective on, philosophy's purpose, methods, the whole shebang.
Okay. A philosophical treasure hunt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm in.
Let's go for it.
So let's start at the very beginning.
With the OG philosopher himself, Socrates,
Yeah.
he famously said that the unexamined life isn't worth living. Pretty intense.
It is intense.
What does that even mean for us today? Why should we even bother examining our lives in the first place?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's like the big question, the
Yeah.
million-dollar question.
Exactly.
I think Socrates, he was really onto something profound. For him, examining our lives, it wasn't just some kind of like intellectual exercise,
Yeah.
It was about like seeking wisdom, truly understanding ourselves, the world around us, and that quest, like that desire to like know and understand.
Right.
It's still relevant today, I think.
Yeah.
It's what drives us to ask those big questions, right? The
Yeah.
questions about meaning,
Yeah.
about morality, about the nature of reality itself.
So it's like he's saying we shouldn't just go through life on autopilot,
That's a great way to put it, yeah. We should actually stop and think about where we're going. Why are we even here?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where philosophy comes in, right?
Yeah.
It gives us the tools, the concepts to really examine our lives critically and thoughtfully.
But not all philosophers agree on what those tools and concepts should be.
Right.
Right?
That's true.
Like you've got Aristotle, he's trying to uncover the fundamental causes of, everything.
Yeah.
And then you've got like the Hellenistic philosophers who are all about living a good life. And then you have Cicero over there, like prepping for death.
Right. Right.
It's a real philosophical buffet out there.
It is. It really is.
So many options.
Yeah. And that's what I think makes studying metaphilosophy so fascinating.
Okay.
Because even from the beginning, right, philosophers, they've had different goals, different methods.
Yeah.
Aristotle, he was all about building these big, elaborate systems,
Yeah.
explaining the universe,
Totally.
But then the Hellenistic philosophers, they were more like about practical wisdom, helping people navigate those like everyday challenges of life, And then you've got Cicero who, saw philosophy as this way to like confront our own mortality.
Yeah.
Find meaning in the face of death.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Heavy.
It's heavy stuff.
So we're seeing already that philosophy isn't just one thing.
No, not at all.
It's multifaceted,
Exactly.
a real rich history of all these different perspectives.
And that's what brings us to metaphilosophy itself.
Okay.
This is where we like step back, right?
Okay.
And we examine all those different perspectives.
Okay.
And we ask, like, what are the underlying assumptions of these different approaches? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? What are they even trying to do? What are their goals?
So instead of just doing philosophy, we're like thinking about doing philosophy.
Yes. We're going meta.
We're going meta.
I like it.
It's like becoming self-aware about our own philosophical practice.
Right.
Morris Lazarowitz, you familiar with him?
Philosopher who thought a lot about metaphilosophy.
Okay.
He called it the investigation of the nature of philosophy.
Okay.
Basically, we're holding a mirror up to philosophy and we're like, okay, let's scrutinize this thing.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right, let's scrutinize.
Let's do it.
So this article mentions all these different schools of thought within metaphilosophy,
Right.
each with their own take on what philosophy is all about.
Yeah.
But it seems like analytic philosophy really dominated the scene for a good chunk of the 20th century.
That's true, yeah.
What's the deal with that?
So analytic philosophy, especially in those early days,
Okay.
it was all about clarity, logic, and precision.
Oh,
Like, think of it as like the Sherlock Holmes of philosophy.
okay, I like
you know,
that. Yeah.
Obsessed with analyzing language, breaking down these complex concepts into their simplest parts,
Mm-hmm.
and then using like rigorous argumentation to solve all those like philosophical puzzles and mysteries.
So they were trying to make philosophy more scientific, more
Yeah.
systematic.
More systematic.
Okay.
Exactly.
Like Bertrand Russell, he's a good example of this, right?
Yeah, Bertrand Russell, one of the pioneers of analytic philosophy, totally embodies this approach.
Yeah.
He had this idea called logical atomism,
Okay.
where he believed that we could understand the world by breaking it down into these, like, tiny indivisible pieces of logical truth.
Wow.
Almost like philosophical Legos, right?
So he thought we could understand everything by breaking it down into these tiny, indivisible pieces.
That was the goal. That was the big project.
Was he right?
Well, that's what we're trying to figure out, right?
Right.
Logical atomism was this really bold project, this grand attempt to provide, like, a firm logical foundation for all knowledge.
Okay.
But it definitely ran into some serious challenges.
Like what?
Well, first of all, it's not always clear that we can break down these really complex concepts into these, like, neat little atomic units of meaning.
Yeah.
And even if we could, like, does that really capture the full richness and complexity of the world that we experience?
Right, right. It seems like reducing everything to logic might kind of miss out on the more nuanced aspects of human experience, like emotions, values, even that feeling you get when you eat a really good taco.
You're right. And that's where I think some of the limitations of early analytic philosophy kind of become apparent.
Okay.
They were so focused on this, like, really rigorous logic and this very precise use of language
Yeah.
that sometimes they kind of overlooked the bigger picture,
Yeah.
that messy, complex reality of what it means to be human.
Well, speaking of messy and complex, we got to talk about Russell's student, Ludwig Wittgenstein.
Oh, yeah, it was Wittgenstein.
He also hopped on that analytic train, but
Right.
he ended up taking it in a very strange direction.
Very strange direction.
His book, The Tractatus,
Yeah.
Total Mindbender,
Oh, yeah.
it basically said that the book itself was meaningless by
Right.
its own standard.
By its own standards.
It's like he wrote himself into a philosophical corner.
The Tractatus is a notoriously difficult book,
Yeah.
but it's also, like, brilliant in its own way,
Mm-hmm.
Wittgenstein, he was trying to draw this really, really sharp line between what language can meaningfully say
Okay.
and what it just can't.
Okay.
And he came to this conclusion that a lot of philosophical problems arise because we're trying to use language to talk about stuff that is ultimately beyond its grasp.
So what's even the point of philosophy if we can't talk about the big questions?
And that's precisely the question that Wittgenstein really grappled with in his later work.
Okay.
So he kind of shifted gears, right?
Okay.
He went from trying to, like, build this perfect, logically precise language
Right.
to actually examining how language works in everyday life, the ordinary use of language.
Yeah, yeah.
And he came to believe that philosophical problems often come up from, like, misunderstandings,
Okay.
misinterpretations of how we're using language in different contexts.
So instead of trying to create some philosophical super language,
Right.
he decided to, like, get down in the dirt with the language we already use.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And that led to a whole new approach in analytic philosophy
Okay.
called ordinary language philosophy.
Okay.
Thinkers like Gilbert Ryle,
Okay.
A.L. Austin,
Yeah.
they argued that we could solve all these, like, head-scratching philosophical problems
Yeah.
by just carefully analyzing
Oh.
the ways we use words
Okay.
in everyday speech.
Makes sense.
Yeah. For them, the key to philosophical insight was just paying really close attention
Okay.
to the nuances of, regular, ordinary language.
So it's like they were saying, hey, maybe we've been overthinking things.
Yeah.
Let's just listen to how we actually talk, and the answers might be right there in front of us.
That's a great way to put it.
But I mean, weren't there also people who were critical of these approaches?
Of course. Yeah.
It seems like focusing just on language might miss some of the bigger questions, right?
That's a very common criticism, yeah. Some people argued that, these approaches, they were too focused on words.
Okay.
And they weren't really addressing those more fundamental questions about, like, the nature of reality, the mind, morality.
Mm-hmm.
They felt like reducing philosophy to just an analysis of language kind of ignored those deeper, more substantial questions that philosophy has, like, traditionally grappled with.
It's like they got lost in the forest for the trees.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Too focused on the details.
Yeah, lost in the weeds.
So this criticism leads us to another interesting turn in this whole story of analytic philosophy.
Okay.
You see, despite its early emphasis on logic and language, analytic philosophy didn't stay confined to those boundaries.
Right.
In fact, there was this kind of philosophical homecoming in the mid-20th century.
Interesting.
This renewed interest in areas that had been kind of sidelined for a while.
Okay, a homecoming.
Oh, a philosophical homecoming.
I like it.
What areas were they returning to?
Well, for one, there was this big revival of interest in normative philosophy,
Okay.
which is all about questions of values, morality,
Right.
how we ought to live.
Okay.
Thinkers like John Rawls,
Yeah.
they brought these questions back to the forefront with their work on justice and fairness.
So it's like philosophers decided, okay, it's time to stop just analyzing concepts and start thinking about how we should actually live our lives.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Rawls's book, A Theory of Justice,
Yeah.
it was a total game changer.
Yeah.
It ignited this whole new wave of discussions about the nature of morality,
Okay.
the role of government, how do we create a more just and equitable society,
Right.
all that good stuff.
It wasn't just ethics that saw a revival, though, right?
No, not at all.
Metaphysics also made a comeback.
It did.
Like, I thought the early analytic philosophers were pretty skeptical of metaphysics,
They were at first.
claiming it was meaningless or, like, beyond the reach of, philosophical inquiry. But then this whole new generation of thinkers started to, like, re-engage with those big fundamental questions about the nature of reality.
They did. It was a very interesting shift.
It's like they realized they couldn't ignore those big existential questions forever.
Yeah, they had to come back and wrestle with them.
Yeah.
Even if it meant, getting a little messy.
A little messy, a little less logical.
Right, exactly.
And this metaphysical revival brought some interesting figures to the forefront.
It did.
Like Peter Strawson.
Yes,
He was all about descriptive metaphysics.
That's right.
Which sounds way less intimidating than, like, the traditional kind.
Or a bit less, right.
It's like, instead of trying to invent some whole new metaphysical system,
Right.
he was more interested in figuring out the system we're already using.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
Like, how are we already thinking about the world?
Yeah, exactly.
And can we describe that?
Strawson thought that the main task of metaphysics was to describe that basic structure,
Yeah.
of how we think about the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are those fundamental concepts and categories that shape our understanding of reality?
Yeah.
Almost like he was trying to draw a map of the human mind.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like showing how all the pieces fit together.
Yeah, how they all connect.
It's like he was saying, okay, let's not get lost in these abstract theories.
Right.
Let's just look at how we actually experience the world
Right.
and try to understand the underlying structure of that experience.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
But Strawson wasn't the only one making waves in metaphysics.
No, not at all.
W.V.O. Quine, that name keeps popping up.
Quine, yeah.
He also challenged some of the core assumptions of logical positivism.
He did, yeah. Quine was a real game changer.
So he took aim at the strict distinction they were making between analytic truths, which are true by definition,
Right.
and synthetic truths, which are true based on experience.
Yeah, he wasn't having it.
What was his problem with that?
Well, he argued that all our beliefs are, like, interconnected in this web,
Okay.
And ultimately, they're all answerable to experience
Right.
this, like, holistic view of knowledge.
Okay.
It really shook things up.
It shook the foundations of logical positivism.
It did. It suggested that even our most basic beliefs about the world,
Okay.
they're not immune to revision.
Based on what we observe.
Right, exactly.
So it's like he was saying, okay, we can't just wall off language from experience.
Right.
Our beliefs about the world, even the big metaphysical ones,
Mm-hmm.
they're constantly being shaped by what we see, hear, and feel.
Yeah, that's a great way to summarize it.
Quine believed that our understanding of the world is, like, constantly evolving and that we
Yeah.
should be open to revising even our most cherished beliefs if, the evidence points in a different direction.
That's right. Yeah, be open to new information, new experiences.
And then there's Saul Kripke,
Okay.
adding another layer of complexity with his idea of a posteriori necessity.
Yeah, Kripke's work is it's definitely mind-bending.
Yeah, a real brain twister.
For sure.
What was he getting at with that idea?
So he argued that some truths, like the fact that water is H2O,
Okay.
those are, like, necessarily true.
Okay.
You couldn't be any other way.
Okay.
But here's the wild part.
Okay.
We discover these necessary truths through empirical observation.
Wait, so he's saying that some things are true in all possible worlds?
Yeah.
Even though we learn about them through science?
Through science, yeah.
That's pretty wild.
It is what? It kind of throws a wrench in, our traditional ideas
Yeah.
about the relationship between, like, empirical knowledge
Mm-hmm.
and necessary truth.
So Kripke really challenged us to rethink some fundamental stuff.
He did. Yeah, he forced us to really reconsider, like, what is necessity, what is possibility, and how do we come to know the truth about the world?
Okay, so we've got this revival of normative philosophy and metaphysics, showing that analytic philosophy wasn't just about, like, logic and language after all.
There was more to it.
But there's this other big movement we need to talk about.
Okay.
Naturalism.
Naturalism.
Yeah. This is the idea that philosophy and science are, like, buddies working together.
The pals.
Yeah, pals solving problems.
Naturalism has become super influential in contemporary philosophy.
Yeah.
Especially in areas like epistemology, philosophy of mind, ethics.
Yeah.
It's all about that strong connection between philosophy and the natural sciences. It argues that scientific methods and scientific findings can be really valuable for addressing philosophical questions.
So instead of treating science and philosophy as, like, separate domains, the naturalists are like, hey, let's team up.
Let's collaborate.
We can learn from each other.
Exactly. So they believe that philosophical inquiry should be informed by scientific discoveries.
And that empirical evidence can help us, refine our philosophical theories.
That's right. We can kind of test our philosophical ideas against what we're learning from science.
And there are different types of naturalists, too, right?
Yeah, there's a whole spectrum of approaches.
Like, some are more focused on using scientific findings to, like, support their arguments.
Right.
While others are actually conducting experiments to test philosophical claims.
Exactly. That's right.
So you've got some who are, like, studying the scientific maps, and then you've got others who are, like, out there exploring the philosophical terrain for themselves.
Boots on the ground, doing the research.
It's cool to see philosophy getting so, like, hands-on.
It's exciting, yeah.
Yeah.
And this experimental approach has actually led to some surprising challenges
Really?
to those, like, traditional philosophical intuitions.
Oh, right. The challenge to intuitions.
Yeah.
I've heard about that.
So traditionally, philosophers have relied on these intuitions, our immediate, like, gut feelings about certain philosophical scenarios as evidence.
Yeah.
But experimental philosophers have found that these intuitions can be pretty inconsistent.
Okay.
They vary from person to person and across cultures.
So if our intuitions aren't always reliable,
Right.
does that mean philosophy is built on, like, shaky ground?
That's the big question.
Yeah.
And it's sparked a lot of debate.
Like what?
Well, some naturalists say we need to move beyond intuitions altogether.
Okay.
And really ground our philosophical claims in empirical evidence.
Right.
Others think, well, maybe we need to be more careful about which intuitions we rely on.
Okay.
Identify the ones that are more likely to be accurate.
Right.
And less susceptible to bias.
It's like we need to double check our philosophical compass.
Yeah.
Make sure it's still pointing us in the right direction.
Exactly.
Naturalism is definitely shaking things up in philosophy.
A bit force.
Yeah, big force.
For sure.
But it's not the only school of thought, out there.
Nope. There are others.
We got to talk about pragmatism.
Pragmatism, yeah.
This very American approach to philosophy.
Yeah, very American.
That's all about, like, the practical consequences of ideas.
Right. So pragmatism is this fascinating tradition.
Okay.
Emerged in the late 19th and early 20th centuries.
Okay.
In the United States.
Yeah.
And it emphasizes the practical effects.
Okay.
Of our beliefs and theories.
So it's less about, like, what is true in some abstract sense.
Right.
And more about what an idea actually does in the world.
Yeah, what difference does it make? How does it change things?
Like, does it help us solve problems?
Exactly.
Does it improve people's lives?
Right. Does it make a difference?
Charles Peirce, one of the founders of pragmatism, he put it this way: the meaning of a concept is determined by its conceivable practical effects.
Exactly.
And then you've got William James, another prominent pragmatist.
Yeah.
He argued that truth itself is what works in our thinking.
Yeah, what helps us navigate the world, make sense of things, solve problems.
So for pragmatists, it's not about sitting in an ivory tower debating abstract ideas.
Right.
It's about getting out there.
Yeah, get your hands dirty.
And seeing how those ideas play out in practice.
Exactly. See what happens.
John Dewey, another key figure in pragmatism.
Yeah.
He emphasized this practical problem-solving aspect of philosophy, right?
He did. He really did.
He argued that it should be engaged with the social and political issues of its time.
Yeah, philosophy should be relevant to what's going on in the world.
It's like philosophy rolling up its sleeves.
Yeah, put in the work.
And getting to work.
Making a difference.
But didn't some critics worry that pragmatism was a bit too relativistic?
Yeah, that was a common concern.
Like, if truth is just what works, doesn't that mean anything goes?
That's what some people worried about.
Yeah.
They argued that pragmatism's focus on consequences could undermine the idea of objective truth, and that it might lead to a kind of relativism where there are no absolute standards.
Yeah.
Others worried that it would neglect the importance of pure, theoretical knowledge. The pursuit of truth for its own sake.
So it's like this philosophical tug of war between the practical and the theoretical, the useful and the true.
It's a tension that runs through a lot of philosophy.
And then we have Richard Rorty.
Oh, yeah, Rayleigh.
Who took pragmatism.
Right.
And just ran with it.
Yeah, he went all in.
Breaking all kinds of philosophical rules along the way.
He was a rule breaker.
What did he do?
Well, he embraced this really radical form of pragmatism.
Okay.
That challenged a lot of those traditional assumptions about what philosophy is supposed to be doing.
So he rejected the idea of objective truth.
He did, yeah. He also rejected the notion that language can mirror reality.
Okay.
In any kind of absolute way.
So if there's no objective truth, isn't he basically saying anything goes?
Rorty's views were definitely controversial.
Yeah.
A lot of philosophers pushed back against those claims.
But he did have a point, though, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Our beliefs about the world, they're always shaped by our language, our culture, our historical context.
All of that.
So instead of searching for some, elusive absolute truth,
right,
maybe we should be focused on finding ways to talk about the world that, promote understanding, cooperation, progress.
Yeah, that was a big part of his project.
It's like he was saying, let's not get bogged down in these endless debates about what's really true.
Right.
Let's focus on having productive conversations, finding common ground.
Exactly. That's a great summary.
And this shift towards a more pragmatic and interdisciplinary approach.
Yeah.
It seems to have carried over into what's known as post-analytic philosophy.
It has, yeah. There are definitely connections.
This sounds like a real melting pot of different influences.
It is. Post-analytic philosophy is this kind of loose movement,
Okay.
that emerged in the late 20th century. And it's characterized by this blurring of boundaries.
Okay.
It takes inspiration from pragmatism, continental philosophy, even the later Wittgenstein.
So they're pulling from all over the place.
Yeah. They're interested in connecting different philosophical traditions.
Right.
And finding new ways to address those philosophical problems that have been with us for centuries.
So it's like they're saying, hey, let's break down these walls between different schools of thought.
Yeah, let's have a conversation.
And see what happens when we have a real philosophical dialogue.
Exactly. Let's see where it takes us.
Post-analytic philosophers, they seem to be really interested in things like the nature of language, the relationship between mind and world.
Yeah.
The limits of knowledge.
All those big questions.
Yeah, those big questions.
They're challenging those traditional divisions within philosophy.
Right.
And creating a more open, more fluid, more interdisciplinary approach.
So it's like philosophy is finally breaking free from all those rigid categories.
Yeah. And exploring new territory.
I like it.
There's a real sense of excitement and experimentation.
Yeah.
In post-analytic philosophy.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
From analytic philosophy to pragmatism, naturalism.
Yeah.
Even a glimpse of post-analytic thought.
Just a taste.
It's been a whirlwind tour.
It has been a whirlwind tour.
But it gives you a sense of the diversity.
Yeah.
The complex.
It's complex stuff.
Metaphilosophy.
There are so many ways to think about what philosophy is and what it should be doing.
And speaking of different ways of thinking, we haven't even touched on continental philosophy.
Oh, yeah. We haven't gotten there yet.
This is where things get really interesting.
This is where things get a little more, a little more out there.
Yeah.
A little more continental.
We're about to trade in our logic circuits for some existential angst.
We might need to buckle up for this one.
Okay, let's do it. Let's journey into the heart of continental philosophy.
Let's go.
I feel like we're about to trade in our logic circuits for some existential angst.
Yeah, there might be a little bit of that.
A little bit.
But really, continental philosophy is this rich and diverse tradition.
Okay.
And it tends to emphasize things like, lived experience,
Yeah.
the nature of existence,
Right.
how history and culture shape our understanding of the world.
So instead of starting with like abstract concepts and logic, they're starting with the nitty-gritty of like what it means to be human.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
Oh, okay.
They're asking those big questions,
Yeah.
like, what does it even mean to exist?
Yeah.
How do we create meaning
Right.
in a world that might be inherently meaningless?
Right.
What is the role of freedom and responsibility in our lives?
Oh.
Yeah, it gets heavy.
Heavy stuff.
Yeah.
And it seems like phenomenology, the brainchild of Edmund Husserl,
Yeah.
played a big role in shaping continental thought.
Huge influence, yeah.
What's the deal with phenomenology? What's the essence of it?
Well, Husserl, he believed that phenomenology could be this, rigorous foundation for all knowledge.
Okay.
He wanted to go back to the things themselves, as he put it.
What does that even mean?
Well, he meant, really focusing on the direct experience of phenomena.
Okay.
Like the way things appear to our consciousness.
Right.
Without all the baggage of our assumptions and theories and preconceptions.
So it's like hitting the reset button on our perception.
Yeah.
Trying to see the world with fresh eyes.
Yeah, clear your mind. Start from scratch.
He developed a method called epoch, or bracketing.
Right.
What's that all about?
Imagine, putting all your preconceived notions about the world into brackets.
Okay.
Setting them aside for a moment.
Okay.
So you could just focus on the raw data of experience.
But why was he so focused on, describing experience?
Yeah.
Didn't he have, bigger philosophical fish to fry?
He did. But he believed that by carefully examining the structure of experience, we could uncover those essential features of consciousness
Okay.
and gain a deeper understanding of, the relationship between the mind and the world.
Okay.
He saw this as a way to address what he called the crisis of European humanity.
Uh-oh, what's that?
This, sense of meaninglessness and alienation
Okay.
that he thought was plaguing modern society.
So he thought that by going back to the basics,
Yeah.
back to, the raw experience of being in the world, we could find a way out of this existential crisis.
Exactly. It was an ambitious project.
It was.
And it had a huge impact on the development of continental philosophy.
And one of the thinkers who took phenomenology in a new direction was Martin Heidegger, right?
Heidegger, oh yeah.
He's got that whole being in the world idea, which always makes me think of a fish swimming in water.
Okay.
It doesn't even think about the water. It
Right.
just exists in it.
That's a great analogy, yeah.
What was Heidegger getting at with that idea?
Well, Heidegger was a really, really original thinker.
Yeah.
And his work can be pretty challenging.
Yeah.
But the core idea is that, we're not just these subjects observing the world from a distance.
Right.
We're always already immersed in the world,
Okay.
entangled with it.
Okay.
Our very being is shaped by this being in the world.
So instead of separating ourselves from the world, we're looking at it through a window,
Right.
he's saying we're a part of the world.
Yeah, we're in it.
We're woven into the fabric of reality.
You got it.
Okay.
And that idea has, profound implications for how we understand ourselves,
Yeah.
our place in the world, even the nature of knowledge itself.
And this emphasis on our interconnectedness with the world,
Yeah.
it also ties into this idea of hermeneutics, right?
It does, yeah.
This is the idea that understanding is always a matter of interpretation.
Right.
We can't just access some objective truth that's out there.
Thinkers like Hans-Georg Gadamer,
Okay.
they emphasize the role of our, historical and cultural background
Right.
in shaping how we see the world.
Yeah.
We don't approach the world with this blank slate.
Yeah.
Our understanding is always filtered through our language, our beliefs, our traditions.
So it's we're all wearing these invisible glasses that color how we see the world.
Yeah.
We don't even realize it.
Hermeneutics reminds us that there's no such thing as this perfectly neutral, objective perspective.
Right.
We're always interpreting, always making sense of the world through our own unique lenses.
And then we have existentialism.
Existentialism.
So it's a bit of a bad rap for being all doom and gloom.
Right.
But it's really about freedom, responsibility, and finding meaning in a world without inherent purpose, right?
Yeah, existentialism is often misunderstood.
Yeah.
But it's a really rich and nuanced tradition.
What are some of the key ideas?
Well, thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre,
Yeah.
Simone de Beauvoir,
Yeah.
they emphasize the radical freedom of human beings.
Okay.
We're not just these predetermined machines.
Right.
We have the power to choose who we are,
Yeah.
what we value.
But that freedom, that can be pretty daunting.
It can be. Yeah.
Like, if there's no inherent meaning in the universe,
Yeah.
aren't we just left to invent our own?
That's the existential challenge, right?
Yeah.
We're thrown into this world,
Yeah.
no rule book,
Yeah.
and we're responsible for creating our own values and finding our own purpose.
That's a lot of pressure.
It is. It can be scary, but it's also incredibly liberating
Okay.
because we're not bound by any like pre-existing meaning or
Yeah.
destiny.
Right.
We have the power to shape our own lives.
So it's
They're
like
all-
we're all artists
Yeah.
creating our own masterpieces out of the raw material of existence.
That's a beautiful way to put it. Yeah.
Existentialism calls on us to like embrace this freedom.
Yeah. Live authentically.
Yeah.
Take responsibility for the choices we make.
And it wasn't just about like individual freedom and responsibility, right?
No, not at all.
Existentialists were also deeply concerned with social and political issues.
They were. Yeah.
Like Sartre and Beauvoir,
Mm-hmm.
they were both politically engaged.
They are activists.
They were using their philosophical insights to fight for social justice.
Yeah. Gender equality, the liberation of all sorts of oppressed groups.
So it's like philosophy taking a stand,
Yeah. Getting involved.
saying we can't just sit back and like theorize about the world.
Right.
We have to get out there and like engage with it, fight for what's right.
Make a difference.
Make a difference.
And that concern with social and political change,
yeah.
it connects really nicely to another big movement in continental philosophy.
Okay.
Critical theory.
Critical theory.
Yeah, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay, this is where philosophy puts on its activist hat, right?
Yeah, you could say that.
What's the story with critical theory?
So critical theory emerged from the Frankfurt School in the mid-20th century.
Okay.
Thinkers like Max Horkheimer,
Yeah.
Theodor Adorno,
Yeah.
Herbert Marcuse.
Okay.
They were drawing on Marx and Hegel, you know,
Okay.
to really critique those social, political, cultural structures
Yeah.
of modern society.
So it's like they were taking philosophy out of the ivory tower
Yeah, bringing it down to earth.
and using it as this tool to analyze and challenge the power structures of their time.
Exactly. They weren't content to just describe the world.
Yeah.
They wanted to change it.
And then there's Jürgen Habermas,
Yeah.
a key figure in that second generation of critical theory.
Yeah, he brought a really interesting perspective to the table.
What was his deal?
Well, he was all about the power of communication
Okay.
and rational discourse
Okay.
to create a better world.
He thought we could talk our way out of problems.
Well, he developed this really complex theory of communicative action. And he argued that open, rational communication, it's essential for a healthy democracy,
Okay.
a just society.
So instead of resorting to violence or oppression, he's
Yeah.
like, hey, let's sit down and talk things out.
Right. Let's reason together.
Let's find solutions that work for everyone.
Yeah, but common ground.
It's like a philosophical call for peace and understanding.
That's a beautiful way to put it, yeah.
So we've got phenomenology, hermeneutics, existentialism, critical theory.
Yeah, we've covered a lot.
It's a lot to process.
It is. It's a lot.
But it seems like there's this common thread running through all these movements.
Okay, what's up?
Like an emphasis on lived experience, the importance of social and historical context.
Yeah.
This idea that philosophy should be like engaged with the world,
Right.
not just detached from it.
Not stuck in the ivory tower.
They're all saying, get out there and like do something.
Yeah, philosophy in action.
And we can't forget Heidegger.
Oh, yeah.
He went on his own philosophical journey, you know, diving deeper into the nature of being,
Yeah, he went deep.
questioning the very foundations of Western thought.
So Heidegger's later work, it's really something else.
Okay.
He became increasingly concerned with the history of metaphysics,
Okay.
and he argued that Western philosophy took a wrong turn somewhere along the line.
Uh-oh, where did we go wrong?
He thought we'd become so obsessed with analyzing beings,
Okay.
the things in the world,
Yeah.
that we'd forgotten to ask the most fundamental question.
Which is?
What is being itself?
Okay.
What does it mean to be?
Whoa.
Yeah, heavy stuff.
Heavy.
It's like we were so busy studying the trees
Yeah.
that we forgot about the forest.
So Heidegger thought this forgetfulness of being,
Yeah.
it led to a lot of problems in the modern world.
He did, yeah. He was especially concerned with the rise of technology
Okay.
that dominates and dehumanizes us.
So he was calling for this new way of thinking.
Yeah, a new way of being,
Oh,
a way to be more attuned to, the mystery of being
Yeah.
and our place in the grand scheme of things.
That's a pretty radical challenge to how we normally think about the world.
It is, yeah.
It's like he's asking us to step outside our usual category.
Yeah, break free from those old ways of thinking.
And confront that ultimate mystery of existence.
Heidegger's later work is definitely mind-bending.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
But it also offers this really profound and thought-provoking perspective on the human condition and our relationship to the world.
And then we have Jacques Derrida.
The
master of deconstruction.
The one and only.
Who always seemed to be, like, shaking things up.
Yeah, he was a troublemaker.
With his playful and often confusing approach to philosophy.
Derrida was a true original.
Yeah.
And his work has had a huge impact.
Yeah.
Especially in, like, literary theory, cultural studies.
Right.
He was very suspicious of any kind of grand philosophical system that claimed to have all the answers.
Right.
He thought we should be constantly questioning our assumptions, even the ones that seem like super obvious and natural.
So what did he do?
Well, he developed this method called deconstruction. Which was all about exposing those, like, hidden biases, power dynamics that are at play in our language and our thought.
So it's like he was taking a philosophical scalpel to our beliefs.
Yeah.
And dissecting them.
Yeah, laying it all bare.
To reveal the hidden agendas lurking beneath the surface.
Derrida was a master at uncovering the ways in which language and thought can be used to, like, reinforce hierarchies. And marginalize certain perspectives.
Right.
He saw deconstruction as a way to disrupt those oppressive structures. And open up these new possibilities for thinking and being in the world.
It sounds like a call to, like, constantly be vigilant.
Yeah.
Never take anything for granted.
Question everything.
Always be questioning.
Yeah, challenge the status quo.
Challenge the status quo.
That's the Derridian spirit.
Wow, what a journey.
It's been a wild ride.
Through the world of metaphilosophy.
Metaphilosophy, yeah.
We've covered so much ground.
We have. From ancient Greece to the present day.
Encountered so many different ideas.
So many perspectives.
It's a lot. I feel like my brain is about to explode.
It's a lot to take in, for sure.
But that's the beauty of metaphilosophy, right?
Yeah, I think so.
It pushes us to, like, think about thinking, to question our assumptions, explore this vast and diverse landscape of philosophical inquiry.
So after this whirlwind tour of metaphilosophy, what's the takeaway for our listener?
What should they be pondering as they walk away from this deep dive?
Well, I'd say the main takeaway is that philosophy, it's not just a set of, like, dusty old books or these abstract theories.
Right.
It's this living, breathing tradition.
Yeah.
It's constantly evolving, challenging us, pushing us to think more deeply about ourselves and the world around us.
I like that.
It's like a toolbox filled with all these really powerful concepts and methods that can help us navigate the complexities of life, you know? Grapple with those big questions and work towards a more just and meaningful future.
It's like we've given our listener a philosophical upgrade.
Yeah, like a new operating system.
A new set of lenses to see the world through.
Exactly. New ways of thinking.
Hopefully they'll feel inspired to keep asking those questions.
Yeah, keep the curiosity going.
Keep exploring. Keep diving deeper.
Deeper and deeper.
Into the fascinating world of philosophy.
Because there's always more to discover.
There's always more to discover.
Keep questioning.
Questioning.
Keep wondering. Keep those philosophical engines running.
Yeah, keep them running.